These are the Boys of Kingsbridge, and they all have at least two things in common. One, we have all been lifelong friends since grammar school. And two, they were all at ground zero on 9/11. Theirs is a uniquely New York story about how guys from the neighborhood reacted on a day that changed the world. I was lucky enough to be born in one of the most dynamic cities in all of history. New York is many things to many people. But I was truly blessed to be born in one of the greatest neighborhoods in that city. Kingsbridge is located in the northwest Bronx, just across the Harlem River from Manhattan. Growing up on the block in the 60s and 70s was like being part of one huge, extended Irish family. Life revolved around St. John's Church and St. John's Grammar School. Everybody felt connected and protected because people looked out for each other. Most of the kids at St. John's Grammar School were first-generation Yanks, whose parents, like mine, were hardworking Irish immigrants. I'm sure that's why Bobby Kennedy drove down 231st Street during his 1968 presidential campaign. My dad shot all this footage. He had an old, wind-up 8mm camera, and he used to love to capture important moments in life, and then have movie nights. The friendships formed on those old stoops, in the alleys, and on the street corner last a lifetime. I grew up at 3018 Kingsbridge Avenue in apartment 1L. And my first friends in life were the Carroll boys, who grew up across the stoop in apartment 1H. John, Kevin, and Brendan was the youngest until his sister Mary was born. Their parents were Beatrice and Martin Carroll, who were good friends with my parents. Kevin was in the same grade as me, and Brendan was a couple of years younger. When we were old enough, we went around the block to St. John's Grammar School on Gowan Terrace. And that's where we met all our friends.
It was old school New York, our neighborhood. You know, the mothers in the front, the kids were in the park, the fathers came home at 5, the mothers screamed out the window at 5:30, and the whole street disappeared because you went up to eat. In the summer, you came back out at 7. At 8:30, you were back upstairs, and you started fresh in the morning.
It was a great place to live. I mean, there was kids everywhere. Everybody had kids. I'm one of 6, and there was always something to do.
Grew up across the street from St. John's Church. I was an altar boy. Played in Little League. Did all the things in the neighborhood with all the other kids.
God, how much experience did you and I and all our friends have on rooftops by the time we were 12? and fire escapes even, you know? I mean, fire escapes were also basketball hoops and chin-up bars and escape routes, you know? So it was just up to our imagination as to where, you know, what we wanted to do.
When we were kids, like, you know, at 8 in the morning, we all just congregated and met and had a blast from 8 in the morning till 8 at night with absolutely no money, no toys, no computers, no cell phones.
Eddie lived at 226 Kimberly Place, across the street from St. John's Grammar School. Mike lived at 231 West 230th, and Danny at 239. We all hung out in the corner of Kingsbridge and 230th Street, or across the street in the playground.
Kingsbridge, growing up at that time, was very much like a small town. You hardly ever left the neighborhood unless you had to go like to the hospital or you had to go to the Bronx Zoo or Yankee Stadium or something. You hardly ever left the neighborhood because there was everything there that you needed.
Growing up in Kingsbridge was a lot of different neighborhoods and really one big, large neighborhood, if you really think about it. From school, no matter what it was, whenever you hung out, guys could live 10 blocks away, no matter what. We're all friends, everybody got along.
Growing up in Kingsbridge was, I guess it was the foundation to the life that I'm leading now. I'd say it was a working class community. Fire trucks screamed by, police cars and ambulances were evident, and we pulled together when need be.
It laid a foundation for how you address the rest of your life. And not to get too philosophical about this, but when we were little kids in class, if an ambulance drove by with the siren on, the nuns would stop class and we would say a Hail Mary for whoever was in that ambulance. If the fire truck went by with the siren on, we would stop class and say a Hail Mary for the firemen, wherever they were going. And, it kind of sticks with you, this sense of community that our parish and our community had for each other. We kind of looked out for each other.
Well, one of the things I learned in Kingsbridge is community service. I mean, look, I became a firefighter. Danny became a police officer, Those are public service jobs. You go out there to help people. I'd say that's the one thing we learned, is that you go and you work and assist your neighbors, whoever they may be.
When I was 16, I inherited the old 8mm camera and started having my own movie nights, starring my friends.
Making films with you when I was a kid was a great time. We used to get psyched to do them because of the fun, and we were kids, but we were all best friends back then, and the camaraderie was just phenomenal.
We filmed virtually all over the neighborhood, different scenes, mannequins off roofs, bodies behind cars and such, all different things. We did a lot. It was fun.
I gotta tell you, that was some of the funniest movies I ever saw in my life, and some of the things that we did were somewhere between a Tom and Jerry cartoon and Little Rascals.
Because your family was the superintendent of that big building there, that you had run of this studio for rooms and basement rooms and stuff that we could utilize for filmmaking. I kind of recall we would do hanging scenes, or we would do roof plunges and all that stuff, with nicely stuffed dummies, I guess, stuff with newspaper or whatever. But and I just remember going around the corner to Tommy Mac's world could take us somewhere else,
Ironically, it was my love of making films that took me away from Kingsbridge. While the guys joined the workforce of our great city, I ended up 2,500 miles away in Los Angeles.
Back in the day, if you didn't become a cop or a fireman, the next thing was to be in the trades, or else you were stuck working in a deli your whole life.
Out of high school, I originally was a Teamster. That job, I worked with my father. After 7 years, I had to get out. I needed something to do also in my mind. I didn't know whether to go back to college or just a trade school, so eventually I settled on HVAC, went to school for it, got into the International Union of Operating Engineers, which is Local 94, and interviewed for a position at 7 World Trade Center in October of 1994. I started there.
October 7th, 1985, I was sworn in as a New York City firefighter. And I did that until April of 2006.
I got in the electricians union, and my father was an operating engineer, which is also a great job, so I was trying to do that. The point that he made that really is true is that when you're out of work, Mike, you can make the same money. When I'm out of work, I drive a cab.
When I was in the academy, I was a company sergeant, and my assistant company sergeant was Claude Richards. Claude was an outstanding fighter. He weighed about 165 pounds and about 5'11", but he was a good boxer, really good boxer. Me, myself, I think I weighed 145 pounds, and I wasn't that good of a boxer. There was another company sergeant who was a big guy. He was a really big guy, about 6'1", 6'2", maybe about 220, 230 pounds. And it was his goal to beat the shit out of every other company sergeant in the academy. And the way that we used to set up for boxing was they would do like a mass formation, and they would say, 1st, 3rd, 5th, 7th rank about face. And whoever you were facing is who you were supposed to square off with. And I remember we're all facing forward, and this guy runs across the gym floor, and he steps in front of me, so that when we do the about face, he's gonna fight me. But he's still facing forward. And I know what's coming. I'm bracing for this, this ass kicking that I'm about to take, because, we're fighting with 1-pound gloves, no headgear. And, the whole gym class saw him come running across the gym floor to stand in front of me. And then all of a sudden I feel a tap on my shoulder, and it's my friend Claude Richards. And he goes, switch places with me. And I says, yeah. I said, okay. And so he does. And when they did the about face, the bruiser turns around, and instead of seeing me, he sees Claude Richards, and he becomes enraged. And he literally yells, I'm gonna rip your head off, and pounds his fist together. With that, the entire gym class stops to watch these two guys fight. And Claude set him up with 2 lefts and then came across with a right that shattered the guy's nose and drove him to his knees. He ended up in the hospital across the street with a broken nose, and that ended his bullying for the rest of the 6 months that we were in the academy. And it's a funny thing when you hear 400 or 500 police officers applaud with boxing gloves on. It sounds like boop, 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 like, so all you could hear is like all these boxing gloves applauding, and that kind of, Claude would never tell that story. He would never tell that story, but I do, because like that's a story of a real hero.
I was working on 40 Rector, which is actually like 2 blocks from the Trade Center, working on the 42nd floor for this company called Vandermeulen. They were like some stock broker. And like in our world, there's good jobs and there's bad jobs, and this was one of the ones you dream about, where it was occupied, there was food, there was coffee, it was clean, it was air conditioned, there was bathrooms.
It was kind of my FDNY experience. I would pick a neighborhood saying, I don't know much about it. And I went uptown a little bit, only about a mile, to 100th Street, ladder 22. I showed up at ladder 22 on November 1995 and was happy to be there.
I went into the police academy in January of 1983. Came out in June of 83, then I went to the South Bronx for something called neighborhood stabilization. I guess I did a good job over in neighborhood stabilization because they sent me to the 4-6 precinct, which was, at that time, was called an A house because of its activity. Years later, I get a phone call from Claude, and he got picked up by the bomb squad because of his military record. And he calls me up and he says, the bomb squad is looking for guys. Why don't you put an application in? And I did. And I ended up getting picked up by the bomb squad, and that was great. The bomb squad is a unique organization. I mean, we are responsible to respond to every explosive incident in the city of New York. On the morning of September 11, 2001, it was a beautiful day in New York City. The sky was clear and as blue as a robin's egg, and it was cool. New York in September can be a wonderful place to be.
So I showed up to work at 6 p.m. on the night of September 10th, and I was scheduled to work 24, and I was going to carry on until 6 p.m. September 11th.
The morning of 9/11 started like any typical day. I actually had it really good. I commuted with my next door neighbor who used to pull in front of my house. I would pick him up, he would pick me up, we would drive to 59th and 9th. I'd hop on the A train, get off downtown and, take a walk. I'm an early bird. I'd get there at 6, have coffee, smoke a cigarette, read the paper, go upstairs.
On the morning of September 11th, I just take the 1 train to South Ferry, but I got off at Cortlandt Street, which the stop is in the World Trade Center. Came up through the World Trade Center and crossed the plaza into 7 Worlds. I got off the elevator on the 6th floor like any other normal morning, went into my office, hit my time card, sat down at the table to have breakfast with everybody. We had a visitor come to the office who needed access to a door down the hallway. I said, I'll take you. I walked out the door. I'm walking down the hallway. The lights dimmed. There was a small explosion, nothing to like warrant what was really happening across the street at the time. I stopped walking in the hallway. I turned around. All the engineers ran out into the hallway. We all looked at each other, and the guys were in the '93 bombing. I wasn't in the Trade Center at the time. I saw it a year later. Said that's an explosion that's in the Trade Center.
I had that day off, and I was really looking forward to the day off. And I was living down on 16th Street and First Avenue, and I could hear the first plane hit from the window, through the window. And I didn't know what it really was, but something was amiss. I thought there was like a thud, and something didn't feel right.
Someone said, turn on the TV, turn on the TV. And so the TV got turned on, and there was some live video footage of the North Tower of the World Trade Center with a big hole in it.
Somebody said a plane hit the Trade Center. So it just, as a matter of fact, on the corner, I was on the 42nd floor, which I think was the top. This guy had a telescope, and we were looking through the telescope at the building. And the first thing I said, dude, no fucking Cessna made a hole like that in the side of that building. That's crazy. Look at the stuff falling out.
We get to the lobby, I walk to the glass. There's a couple of us together. 2 of the engineers go out on the plaza. I stay inside. At this point, as my 2 friends are outside, large pieces of metal are coming off the north facade of Tower 1 where the plane entered, and it's landing on the plaza. Thundering loud, man, solid metal.
We're kind of like, as everyone was, kind of tuning in on this and trying to make sense of what we were seeing. But there was a big hole in the upper reaches of that building. But it seemed kind of manageable.
When I start looking up, I'm watching the debris come down in case it looks like it's going to come closer to our building and warn these guys. Something comes out the window that's not metal. And after it falling for a while, I realized it's a body. It's a human being that fell out or jumped out a window. And he goes past us and lands in the corridor of 6 and Tower 1 to an unbelievable sound. I mean, I've never heard anything like it. You wouldn't imagine. It was like I don't know, as loud as metal.
But something didn't really feel right, so I turned on a local news station called New York 1. As soon as I turned it on, they started reporting that a plane had hit the World Trade Center.
At this point, our radios crackle with a guy screaming for help. He's stuck on our window rig on the north facade of 7 building. He screamed, please get us out. From the building, the jet making impact with Tower 1, when I had that dip, his rig lost power. He's frozen on the 45th floor on a window rig with his partner. We have to go to the 48th floor of our building to find a circuit breaker.
When the first jet hit, Eddie was uptown at the firehouse on 100th Street. Danny was at home at 16th and 1st. Brendan was in 7 World Trade Center, and Mike was at 40 Rector, while I was still asleep on the West Coast.
So this guy, Randy, who was a laborer there, who I became friends with, I was working for him, was standing there, and you don't realize the time that passed. He goes, dude, look at this other fucking plane coming. And literally, it was so close to the building that I was in, I almost seen the heads in the window as it was going by. And then we turned around, and just as it just fucking...
Tower 2 just explodes. Debris lands on our lobby. Things go past the building up Church Street. We stood there, all of us, looked at each other and said, what was that? And someone said to us, Tower 2 just got hit by another plane.
And as I'm watching the TV, I saw the second plane hit the South Tower. And I couldn't believe it. I thought that in my naiveness, I thought that the second pilot was trying to assess the damage and lost control of the plane and hit the South Tower. That's how naive I was, that people would actually fly planes into the World Trade Center.
All of a sudden, we're witnessing a second plane come into the other tower, the South Tower, much lower, and it was like, holy fuck.
You just don't believe it's happening, you know what I mean? Because the thing looked like you could throw a rock at it. and it went right by the window. I mean, it would look like slow motion. I mean, that's what I remember. I mean, it literally looked like it was going like this, right by the window. And then right at the end, it turned. I mean, and the explosion. And the weird part is, you didn't hear anything. Like, I didn't hear anything. And the fucking glass, I remember we were standing there, the glass went 2 feet right in like this and snapped back out. I don't remember hearing glass breaking. I don't remember hearing that concussion or whatever, but all I remember is that we were just standing there because, you know, everything just went all over the place. You know, the windows and the plane and flames. It was like what you see like in a Michael Bay movie now, you know, just special effects. Surreal is the word everybody uses, but, I don't know what the hell that means.
The upper floors just exploded, and you gotta understand, Tower 2, from 7's perspective, was straight across the plaza. I could see the lobby of it from where I was standing, and all the debris landed right in the plaza, along with everything else that came throughout with that jet. And a lot of the debris went right past us, went up the street. We had to get people out of the building. We had a triage unit set up in the loading dock with injured already from Tower 1 and Tower 2. It was just absolute mayhem and chaos.
At that point, we saw what was happening. Now we knew we had two towers. We had two towering infernos, and within minutes of that happening, the fire department dispatcher over the voice alarm system basically went up the west side of Manhattan from we'll say there's a firehouse on 38th Street all the way up to 113th Street, and did the same thing on the east side, and just sent every engine company and every ladder company down to that location.
There was going to be a mobilization, and so I run out of my apartment, and then when I hit First Avenue, I look down First Avenue, and both of the towers are on fire, and great columns of smoke are coming out of both towers, and it was startling to see, absolutely startling. People were stopped in the streets, shocked.
I don't know why you just sort of take charge and you make sure everybody's, you know, let's go, let's go, let's go, because there were a lot of few older people, and then, you know, then we got, like I said, then we got evacuated and went downstairs and sort of made sure everybody was in our little tight-knit family that we became up there. Everybody was cool and everybody was sort of safe. And so I said to this guy, Randy and Charlie, I said, I'm going to go down there. You know, maybe you could help somebody.
And the senior guy in the firehouse going, you know, a lot of firemen are going to die today. He was able to blurt that out, and we got on the fire truck and we knew where we were going.
I remember pieces, you know, like of when, as I was getting closer to the Trade Center, of people, but it was almost like a movie, you know what I mean? Like, it was a fucking movie, because I remember seeing an arm and going, that's weird, you know, and just running towards the Trade Center. But then I knew it was weird because I seen a head on top of a car. And it was a girl, and her mouth was open, and her one eye was open, and she was like that. But it looked like somebody took her hair and placed it there.
And now we're doing stair checks. We're on elevators checking every floor, making sure people are out of their space. Some people are still at their desk working. I mean, this is what you were dealing with. Some knew what was going on the south facade of the building. They could see the tower. Others on the north elected to stay working. It was like a dream. I mean, you can't describe it. They weren't even in touch with reality at the time.
I commandeered a car from a local security guy, and he drove me over to the bomb squad. A couple other guys who live in Manhattan, whose day it was off, showed up for work.
I didn't really realize the extent of it till I went down there and seen just, you know, the mayhem that was going on. And I mean, people actually, like these crazy firemen are coming down, running in there. You know, and I even remember thinking to myself, going, you know, I'd be in the truck making a phone call or something. I would never even think about running there, but, you know, that's what they do.
There was a staging area set up alongside the World Financial Center, the east side of the World Financial Center. So now we basically get ourselves in front of these two buildings.
And the eerie thing about all of this is the piped-in music on the plaza is still playing when everything goes silent. There's no sirens anymore. We're just all standing there, and I walked out to the Tubular Bridge, and you could hear the music playing. It was like too surreal, like two different scenarios. This is horror, and this is like piped-in music for people to eat their lunch to.
I remember that the streets like exploding with, you know, because you can imagine a computer monitor, which weighs nothing, but coming from the 95th floor, it's gonna do some damage, you know, and that's what was going on. It was just, and you can imagine how many other people lost their lives just because of that, because of a telephone or somebody's high heel came or something, you know, came, and that's what was happening. People were running and they were full speed and then they weren't running anymore.
Be careful. There's jumpers. Watch. There's people jumping out of these buildings.
But the conscious decision to stand on a 100th floor building, look out a window, watch the person previously leave that window in front of you, see what happens to them, think of your kids and your wife, and walk out that window. It's a tough move. Tough. And that's a day of experience. One after the other. It's tough, man. Holding hands. It was bad.
Now you start glancing up at these two towering infernos where there are people jumping out of 80, 90-story. I mean, they're not doing that to save themselves. They're desperate. Fire will make you do that, though. Fire will make you do things that you don't think you could do, and you can't hang out in fire.
I didn't even look up. I might have looked up once or twice, you know? And you would hear these sounds of people hitting the deck. And from that height, it's a sound.
So you diverted your eyes, you closed your eyes, whatever it was, but you couldn't close your ears. And the impact of them hitting the ground was explosive. And you're hearing that at regular intervals. So I'm probably out of the 8 sides of the 2 buildings, we probably had visual of four of the 8 sides. And there was more people were jumping than probably anyone can imagine.
And there was no screaming like the movies or any of that. You didn't hear any of that. It was just one whomp after another. Whomp, whomp, whomp. And it was just, that's the one sound never forget that.
We were given an assignment to go into the building, and the assignment was to get to the 75th floor of the South Tower and start searching. And it became quite evident for the information we were getting was that we were going to walk up to the 75th floor to begin our job.
All the engineers have been summoned to the lobby. Every elevator's got to be grounded, checked, inspected, make sure no one's on it. And then you do a staircase check where you physically go to the top of the staircase and walk it with a flashlight.
If I can get up there and just stop one person from taking that death leap, that's what I'm gonna do.
I signed in to the logbook over at the bomb squad, went down to my locker, and I started putting on my gear. And when I came up, Steve Burbridge and Claude Richards were there. And we took a car, and we went down to the corner of Church and Vesey Street, where the bomb squad had already staged. The day tour for the bomb squad, the guys who were working, they were already down there trying to assess the situation.
So we proceeded through a narrow corridor from the hotel, and to get to the South Tower from the Marriott Hotel there, you had to walk into the lobby of the North Tower, and then through the concourse and into the South Tower.
By this time, I was up and watching TV in shock, like the rest of the world, not knowing that Eddie is in the lobby of Tower 1, Brendan is in Building 7, Danny is at the corner of Church and Vesey, and Mike is just south of Tower 2. These guys who grew up on the same block were now on the same block on 9/11.
We are just about to exit the North Tower into the concourse, and all of a sudden, the shit hit the fan. Next thing, I was flying through the air. I was thrown across the lobby of the North Tower. My helmet, my tools were stripped from me, and I crashed to the ground. I'd say it threw me 10 to 20 feet.
I was in the northwest corner office with my assistant chief engineer for that day, and we were loading D batteries into mag lights to do a stair search again. We constantly wanted to check the stairs. More attendants could be in there. Unbeknownst to the guys that I'm with, Tower 2's coming down. We have no clue that this is happening. When over the radio, a distress call comes over the radio from two of our coworkers. Three of them really are down in this room, in a pump room. They're screaming in the radio, and the guys that I'm with can't relate. We're like, what's going on? Why is he, screaming so loud? What's going on? Two firemen coming in and Mayday the place. Mayday, Mayday.
I remember this guy running, and why I keyed in on him, I have no idea, but he was like cut in half. I don't know what hit this poor bastard, but like he fucking fell one way, his legs fell one way, and his other felt the other way. I said, I gotta get the hell out of here. And that's when the tower started falling. So I ran, and it was like all of those movies. They're running, and people are behind them, and all of a sudden, as I was running, it felt like I was getting hit with little pebbles in the back of my head, and then it was pitch black.
We're standing there, and the south tower had just collapsed. So one of the towers had just collapsed, but you could still see things quite clearly. Enough of the smoke had settled that you could see what was going on. But the north tower is still up, fully inflamed.
And there's a knock at the front door of our office. Now again, we think the building's empty. We're trying to empty this building out. It's very difficult. It's two gentlemen from the United States Secret Service who have asked us, how do we get out of the building? Go down the stairs. Right there's a staircase. We can't. It's full of smoke. We can't get out of here. The door opens, a young mailroom employee from upstairs comes in and runs right past us to the other staircase. There's only two north stairways in the building, no other staircases out. We instruct them, go that way. We go and go with them because we can hear what's going on in the lobby over the radio. I mean, we're hearing Maydays over not our radios, we get a fireman calling Maydays over engineers' radios.
As I'm laying there, I said to myself, I knew this was gonna suck. Just that you knew nothing good was gonna come out of it. And I was dead. I said, I'm dead. I don't know, I thought I had, was falling down into the basement.
We met some emergency service cops up there, and we asked them, how can we help? What do you need? And the emergency service lieutenant is pointing up at something. He's pointing at something up in the sky, and a piece of sheet metal comes down, and it cuts him from the thumb to the armpit.
Darkness, can't breathe, dead. And it was like, see ya. And no idea what was going on. But all I do know that the rescuers had become victims.
There was two cops who came out of the North Tower, and between them they have this very, very large woman, and she had lost a shoe, and that's a bad thing to lose when you're in a building fire collapse type of situation. And she was very large, and they were basically struggling to try to hold her up and get her off the plaza. And she got out of the building, and she just thought that this was where she could sit down and get rescued. But she had to walk off that plaza herself because there was no way we could carry her. So I run up to this woman and I says, lady, if you don't walk off this plaza, we're all gonna die because we're not gonna leave you. And she found the strength and she walked off that plaza.
And then I heard Steve Klee, who was a member of the thing, say, ladder 2-2 roll call. Well, if I'm dead, I hear a voice. We regrouped. I didn't have a radio, which at one point, many days later, I told my coworkers, I said, I wish I had a radio. And John Malley in particular, I remember saying, no, you don't. He goes, the screaming, and I'm dying, I'm trapped, was of such a magnitude. He goes, he'll never forget that.
Now I was walking, I was covered in all that stuff, and there was some guy there with a compressor, and he was blowing people off. And I remember standing there, and he just blew me off, whatever, and then I went into Jeremy's, and I hadn't drank in 4 years that day. And I went into Jeremy's and grabbed a 32-ounce beer and guzzled it.
With this, we go to the east staircase, start coming down, and people are telling us, make sure the lobby's still there. When you get to the lobby, you've got to make sure the third floor lobby, that's the main lobby, is still there. We get to the third floor, we're actually touching the floor, the granite floor, to make sure it's going to be all right to walk across the lobby to the escalator to get out of the building. And I look at the security, a huge concierge desk in 7 World Trade, and the security guards make an announcement still. Tower 2 is across the plaza, gone.
The plan was we were going to look for survivors in the customs house and then evacuate them with us and head north. One of the emergency service cops who were there was a guy by the name of John Valera. Me and John were cops up in the 4-6 precinct together. One of the nicest guys you're ever going to meet. His first words to me as he's coming out of a burning inferno is, "Danny, how are you? How you doing?" I go, "I'm good, John. How you doing?" And as we're walking over towards building number 6, he tells me, "I have another respirator. Do you need a respirator?" And I said, "No, I got a respirator. I actually had a respirator left over from the '93 job that I threw in my bag." But Danny had a paper filter. Claude Richards, my partner, had a paper filter. And so I said, maybe Claude would want it. And them two guys married up as we were entering into building number 6.
When I got to the escalator, we were told then, everyone's out of here, go, everyone go. I took all the flashlights I had. There was a fireman with a mask, and I said, here, take these. You're gonna need them. He took them, we went down the escalators, walked over to our loading dock and exited.
Okay, now we're getting out of here. Because there was, everyone was bleeding and you know, we couldn't breathe, eyes were burning out of our heads. And, but then, let's get out of this building, but be careful. I mean, there's people jumping. We kind of ran for it, you know, and ran across the street. And again, really not knowing what had happened, just that we'd become victims. EMS had set up a triage center in the lobby of the American Express building, which is across the street at the World Financial Center. At that point, because of what was going on, I said, I'm going to the river.
As we got into building number 6, we started sweeping through the halls, heading west. And I saw a water cart there. And I decided to stop for about 2 seconds to grab a bottle of water. But then I decided, no, I don't need it. We're gonna be out of here really soon. I'm out of here, right? You know. So when I look up, I could see that they had already moved all the way down the hallway. So I ran to catch up with them. And the moment I caught up with the group of guys in front of me, the North Tower started to come down. And you could hear it coming. You could hear it, you could feel it. And it was a tremendous, powerful sound. It just sounded overwhelmingly powerful to me, and it was coming down on us.
Was over leaning against some construction barrier or something over near the river, just trying to get my act together. And next thing we were diving under cars because there was this other massive explosion.
So the guys who were in front of me all got up against the wall. And you try to become as small as you can. You try to become as little and as tiny a target as you possibly can. And we only had seconds before this thing reached us. And, you know, so I sent out a short prayer. I said, God, if you're gonna take me, please make it fast. You know? If you're gonna take, I didn't have the balls to say, spare me, you know? The only thing I could say is, God, if you're gonna take me, you know, please take me fast. And so we're all hunched over, and like, we're hunched over trying to get small. And I kept on waiting for like a giant piece of steel to come through my back and out my chest because I thought that would be the fastest way to go, like a big chunk of steel coming through you. And then it hits, you know? The ductwork and the ceiling on top of us fell down on us, hitting us across the back. And I had a helmet on. Thank God I had a helmet on because I took a good hit to the head, but I had a helmet on. And for a brief second, you're like, oh my God, we made it. Like, oh, we made it. And then all of a sudden, everything went black.
when we exited 7 the last time, Tower 1 was still standing. So we ran up to about 3 blocks north of 7 on Greenwich Street, and we watched Tower 1 fall. And it fell, and when it was going down, it went sideways, straightened itself and went, and all of us looked at each other because 7 was blocking us, and we said, is the whole thing gone? And we knew guys in there.
There was so much debris in the air, you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. And my little respirator mask clogged up almost instantly. It was as black as possible. I had no goggles on, so I had all this stuff going into my eyes, and I couldn't see. I'm holding on to the guy in front of me. I'm actually holding on to his air bottle. I couldn't breathe, could not breathe. And it was at that moment I really became like terrified. You know, it was terrifying.
I remember some guy saying, well, they're both down. What do you mean they're both down? He goes, they're both down. What are you talking about? He goes, towers, they're down. I said, you tell me 110-story buildings are down? He goes, they're both down.
I said, oh my God, how is this? I could survive this collapse, but now I'm gonna suffocate, you know? And I seriously thought about pulling the gun of the cop in front of me and putting an end to it because it was so painful to breathe. You could not breathe. In the blackness, the guy who was at the front of the line went to the back of the line. And we all turned around and we held on to each other. We were going to try to crawl out of this wreckage the same way we went in, thinking that we could. And we only went about 10 feet and the floor stopped. There was no floor underneath us. There was no walls. When the North Tower came down, it came down on the roof of the building that we were in. And it went right through the roof, right through every floor, into the sub basement, leaving this giant chasm in front of us. And so that was not a way out for us.
It was it was the worst scene. There was fire trucks that were mangled, tossed around like little toys. There was smoke, and there was no towers.
Luckily, that debris, while it was very, very dense, it was also kind of heavy. And within three minutes or so, long 3 minutes, it started to filter down. And you could start to take really short, painful breaths. And so it was at that moment that I realized that I was missing Claude Richards, my partner, and John Delara.
You know, from what it was that morning, because that was a perfect, crystal clear, 78-degree, not a cloud in the sky day, to, you know, something from, you know, what we used to say, like a Godzilla movie with the, you know, buildings and the papers, and it was like the world was over. That's what it looked like down there. You know, it was just total chaos. Everybody was in the same boat. That was the bad part. The cops, the firemen, the civilians, the people, you know, you just didn't know what, you know, you just kept thinking it was going to keep going on. Like, there are more planes coming. Like, this can't be it. You know what I mean? Now, what else is going to come?
And I'm looking for Claude, and I find this civilian there. There's a civilian. I find this guy, and he has a very powerful flashlight. And he can't find his buddies either, right? So I take his flashlight, and the guy's holding my hand. He will not let go of my hand, right? And I go back to where the edge of the world is there, the edge of this chasm of building number 6. And at that time, enough oxygen had come back into the environment that the fires were starting to build up, and you could actually see into this abyss and see the fires going. And I knew that if Claude was behind me, or if them guys were behind me, they were gone. And the truth is that him, John Delara, and Mike Curtin were crushed under, you know, hundreds of tons of debris, and we weren't able to recover their bodies until the following Easter. Yeah.
What you saw in an hour, people have probably not seen in a lifetime. I mean, just horror, absolute horror, man. It was unbelievable. What you were seeing, indescribable for anyone. I mean, just looking at firemen's faces going in the building, you're like, wow, this guy's got to go in there now. I mean, I'm running the hell out of here. And this poor guy's coming in here for a job. I mean, this is his job, man. I mean, A lot of respect for those guys.
Now we were assembling along the promenade of the Hudson River there, which would be to the west of the World Financial Center. Firefighters were showing up from the Bronx and other boroughs, and they were kind of, I mean, trying to get a grasp of what was going on. And then I remember seeing Chief Jim Horton, who I've known my whole career. Good guy, I like Jim, and he was a chief, and he actually took our names down. So they were trying to figure out who was around and who wasn't around. John Malley, Kevin Gorman, Fernando Camacho, and myself looked at each other and said, you know what, there's a firehouse on Houston Street and 6th Avenue. Let's go up there. We can kind of get our act together. We can notify whoever needs to be notified. So we proceeded to walk up West Street, away from the World Trade Center.
So we ran up to 388 Greenwich, and the security guard allowed us in. And I was telling him, dude, you got a phone? We need a phone. I got to call somebody. I couldn't get my wife in Putnam County. My parents still lived in the Bronx. For some reason, I just kept dialing their phone number. My mother picked up, and I tell my mother, Mom, it don't matter what name I spell for you. I'm going to give you a first name, and I'm going to give you a phone number. Call them and tell them everybody's okay. We lost nobody. It's going to take us a while probably to get out of here. I assumed I'd be there all night. I didn't know how it was all going to work, but I just wanted all the families, and she did that.
Actually, when we hit daylight, when we came out on the plaza, there was a lot of fire department rigs with passive alarms on them that if you don't move for a certain amount of time, they start to chirp. They start to go off. And there was a whole set of them going off all around us.
I went back out on the street, met with the building manager. At this point, an F-16 flies over.
And everybody fucking went, oh my God, and fucking people started running again. And
we can't tell, it's a cavern. We're looking up, what is that? Is it another plane? And all of a sudden the police officer yelling, he's ours, he's ours. People on the Brooklyn Bridge are running, everybody's freaking out.
And we were gonna walk to Brooklyn because we heard the subway was running in Brooklyn, but then was saying, by the time you go to Brooklyn, you could walk to, our car was on 59, we could walk to 59, so we ended up walking from the Trade Center to 59th Street.
So now I have to try to get back up to the office, and I'm covered with dirt. I am just covered from head to toe with debris. And I'm trying to find a phone so I could call the office and let them know that I'm alive, right? And I guess about a block and a half away from the ground zero, I find a phone, and I call the office, and it's Steve Burbridge picks it up. And he goes, oh my God, Danny, you're alive. Oh my God, we thought we lost you. Come home, come home.
Everyone had fucking made it home. The most miraculous thing.
Next day, of course, like the city was closed. I think they closed the bridges. You couldn't even get in there. So on the 12th at night, my super called me. He sort of like runs the company and asked me, you think you can get down to the Trade Center? And I said, I'll try. The next day I got in, met him there, and I never left for 6 months. And we were, like I said, I was with Allcom Electric. We were the only electricians that were inside the hall, inside the pit.
And at that point, it had been established that the fire department was now going to go on a 24 on, 24 off schedule. And I didn't have to be at work the next day.
I mean, you got home the next day and you were all talking to each other, and it was phone calls, and you don't talk to anybody else. It was like, who was down there? Who? You never found him, he's never went home, he never did this. You're like, man, for a day, I mean, most of these guys just went to work, and that was it, and they never went home.
I was back to work like the second or third day after the incident, and I would walk to work. And I'm walking home from work, and there's a cafe restaurant down in Greenwich Village, and they have outdoor seating. I never treated myself to the luxury of having a glass of wine in one of these cafes that populate the area around the precinct, Just something I would never think of doing. And I says, you know what? I'm alive. And I'm gonna have a glass of wine. I'm gonna sit here and think. I'm gonna have a glass of wine.
In the beginning, it was insane. It was insane. I mean, I remember my work boots melting on the pile, because everyone's walking around, and I mean, after a while, you just realize you weren't saving anybody. I mean, you realize that that day. I mean, because there was nothing left. It was insane. There was no computers, there was no chairs, there was no tables, there was no windows. It was just a giant pile of girders and dust. It was crazy.
One of our jobs after 9/11 was cleaning, removing filters and putting new filters into all the AC units, and also cleaning the coils on the cooling towers. And it was brought to our attention that not only was it concrete dust and sheetrock and such, but also bone ash. And these people were vaporized essentially each time the floors fell. I mean, anybody that worked down there, how many are still missing, never accounted for? There's nothing left of them.
When I would come home, people would say, did they find anybody? Meanwhile, you know, you want to, like, because my kids were young then, you know, did they find, you want to just give a little glimmer of hope. You don't want it to make it some, so you'd say, not yet, or, you know, everybody's looking. Meanwhile, you know, if you spent 1 minute down there, you would go, nobody's leaving this place. I mean, everybody was, like Brendan was saying, you know, it was just vaporized.
God knows what we inhaled down there, because like Mike said, there was not one computer left. There was not one piece of office furniture. 40,000 people worked in them towers. Every one of them had at least one computer on their desk. Many of them had 2 or 3. Every one of them computers and computer monitors got pulverized into a dust that we all breathed in.
You can't even imagine it, that all those buildings fell, and there wasn't that much left when they all fell. After, you know, if you look at the big picture of 2 giant skyscrapers falling, there was only a couple piles of steel and some dust, and I mean, it was gone in 2 months. It was gone.
One of the things that sticks in my mind a lot is the pain that the New York City Fire Department went through. The New York City Police Department lost 23 officers in one day, including my partner, Claude Richards. The fire department lost 343, and it's a much smaller department. Them guys were absolutely out of their minds in grief, you know?
343 firefighters did not return home after responding to that event. We had the task of honoring our dead and taking care of families that were near and dear to us, and it was endless. It went on till December.
People really were taking time and reflecting as to what was important, and what we were coming away with is community is important. You know, the people next to you, they're important, and it was a very sad time to be in New York City, but it was also a time of where New York really pulled together, and it was a fantastic time to be in New York, witnessing this pulling together.
I've said that, you know, after seeing that on 9/11, none of this bothers me anymore. It doesn't bother me when I'm stuck in traffic and the guy's beeping the horn and you want to get on him with a pipe, but you just, you know what? You just don't do it anymore. You know what I mean? Life is just too short and too simple, and you can make it as hard as you want, but you can also make it as easy and peaceful as you want. And that's the way I try and live my life today. You know, just a little prayer in the morning, a little prayer at night, and like my dad used to say, once your feet hit the floor in the morning, life is good.
Shortly after 9/11, I got activated by the United States Air Force. I did a 2-year activation, holding down 2 pretty important jobs for them down in Washington, D.C. area. It was in July of 2002. I was working for the Air Force down in the Washington, D.C. area, and I was getting out of work, and I'm walking across the parking lot, and I'm with an Army officer, a contemporary, when I receive a phone call on my cell phone from this woman who asked me if I was Detective McNally from the bomb squad. And I said, yes, I am. She goes, do you remember me? I go, well, who are you? And she goes, well, I'm the woman from 9/11. I said, are you the woman who lost your shoe on the plaza, or who had lost your shoe and the 2 officers were helping escort you off the plaza? And she goes, yes. And it turned out her name was Barbara McDonald, and she worked for the Port Authority. And she tracked me down through the bomb squad to thank me on the phone. And as I'm walking across the parking lot, I'm talking to her, and this Army officer is listening to what's going on my phone call. And then I hang up, and he goes to me, That is the coolest thing I ever heard. Somebody calling you, thanking you for saving their life. Yeah, it was a nice feeling that she reached out, you know. She put a name with a face, which was nice.
I said, I got to overcome it. I don't want to work in Midtown. I said, I'm never going back to the Trade Center. I like the company I work for. I love the guys I work with. And I said, you know what? If they offer it, I'm going to go back. And I did, and I think it helped me deal with it a little better, you know?
I came back to New York. I was requested to stay with the Air Force as a civilian agent, and I went to work on the Joint Terrorism Task Force here in New York City. I was the DOD representative to the Joint Terrorism Task Force here in New York. And I did that until I was promoted, and I took over the Air Force office here in New York City. And I did that for a while, but at some point in time, I decided that I wanted to retire. I had retired from the police department in 2004, and then in late 2008, I just decided that it was time for me to get on with the rest of my life.
I'm still living in Mayapack, where I was on 9/11. I'm married, 2 daughters, married to Kim. I have 2 daughters, Taylor and Cassidy. Things are good, great family. I'm working back at 7 World Trade Center. I've been here since 2005. I just take every day as it comes, and take nothing for granted.
In the 9/11 2001 story, someone who became designated as victim number 1, victim 001, was Father Michael Judge, a Franciscan friar. And Father Michael Judge was a fire department chaplain from the early 90s till his death on September 11, 2001. And it's just, he was just a great man. He was a personal friend of mine. And I say Michael's prayer every day, which is, Lord, take me where you want me to go. Let me meet who you want me to meet. Tell me what you want me to say, and keep me out of your way. Amen.
My life is pretty good. My daughter just graduated from college. My son's in the University of Maryland doing great. Would I like a Porsche and a mansion? Who wouldn't? But after what I seen that day, my life is pretty good.
In April of 2006, I filed my retirement papers, and they were accepted. And I have kind of been out of the Eastern time zone since then. And I've relocated to Salt Lake City, Utah. So when I'm skiing or I'm sailing or I'm swimming or I'm sitting on a bench, I've got lots of company because I have the opportunity to live another day. And so has it changed me? Yeah, I respect their sacrifice, and I realize that it's up to me to live in their honor.
A lot of people are reaching out to me to, you know, go with them to memorial services and you know, speak on behalf of this family or something. And it really brings back a lot of emotions. And I'm better now than I was a year after it. I'm better now than I was 2 years after it. I'm better now than I was 3 years after it. And I hope as I get further away from 9/11, I, you know, return to my old self.
On 9/11, I sat in front of my TV in shock for 12 straight hours. I wanted to do something, but I felt so helpless. I forgot that feeling for more than 9 years, until there was talk of the 10th anniversary. And then I realized what I could do. I could do what I learned from my dad and document the important moments in my friends' lives. Let the world know what my buddies, the Boys of Kingsbridge, did on 9/11. Brendan helped clear his building of civilians and did multiple sweeps to make sure everyone was out before he left. And when the building finally did collapse, there were no casualties. Mike took charge and made sure everyone was evacuated safely from the office he was working in, and then ran towards the World Trade Center to see if he could help. Eddie was willing to walk up 75 flights to see if he could save even just one person, and was literally on the threshold of death when the South Tower came down. Danny saved one woman's life and then knowingly risked his own when he continued to search for anyone who needed help. He got pretty banged up when the North Tower fell on the Customs House, but he also got a Medal of Valor from the mayor of New York. That's their story. On the darkest day in New York history, they thought of helping their neighbors. And that shows the character and the humanity of the Boys of Kingsbridge, from grammar school to ground zero.